are sort of critical words for effective 21st century business, in my view.
Yeah, the reason I'm really asking this is Croatia is facing up one of the biggest corruption cases in the food industry connected with the food company Podravka here in Koprivnica in Croatia because it is showing out that involvement of the manager structures and maybe on the other side of the politicians, one of the names that has been mentioned in the media is the Minister of Economy. And really the perception of Croatian people is really bad about the management and the management board and the supervisory board. How to change this perception in a society when you have such a cases? And this is not the only case, let's be clear. This is a private company, but there are also public-owned companies. The part of that it's owned by the Croatian government is 25%. So it's considered like the government should do something about this. They should make a decision. But there are also other private companies and public companies facing such a cases of corruption.
Well, that is a really critical issue and a critical question. And it gets back to sort of the word I used just a few minutes ago of trust, and that has to be trust in the business community, in business-to-business relationships, but ultimately for the system to work, it has to be the voters or the public or consumers who have trust in the business people as well as trust in their government leaders. Clearly worldwide, and certainly true in the United States too, the faith, the trust that Americans have in the government or the business community and business leaders has decreased. And I think worldwide there's an increasing amount of cynicism and disbelief to what statements are made both by politicians and business leaders. I think there's, the situation of the food industry in Croatia is both, I think, shocking to be sure, but also positive. I mean, you may think that 10 years ago, 20 years ago in Croatia, the same situation would never have become public and never been publicized. Clearly, these are things in the U.S., whether it was now almost 10 years ago, or about 10 years ago, the Enron scandal, or just within the last month, pictures of billionaires being taken off with front pages, pictures of jail for insider trading, are both good examples that people get caught and we treat these things very seriously. But it also, as people indicate, is probably a sign that these things are occurring over and over again. So I guess I think the key is we create an expectation, not that this is the mafia and you beat the rules, but create an expectation that in the long run you follow the rules, you're honest, you're open, you're transparent, and people who do things the right way will in the long run be successful.
But also there is another question which relates then, okay, you are caught and everybody's talking about this affair, but you have to be responsible for that. You have to pay back to society. You did this bad thing. So you go to the court and you're sentenced to jail. But this is not what is happening in Croatia. This is the second part of the problem. So judiciary reform also is one of the big questions. Is there, because if it's public like that, when you are caught and trialed and you end up in the prison, this is really the complete message that you're sending back to the public. This is the way that Enron was dealt with? Is this the way that Croatia should basically deal with this kind of problems?
I think so. I think so. Now, the other extreme, if you go back to countries like Korea or Japan, there, if you would do the same things that are done in the United States or in Croatia, there's really public and personal embarrassment. And to the extent that some business leaders will be so embarrassed from themselves and their families and their reputations that they commit suicide. I'm not suggesting
different cultures
that.
Also,
it's a very different culture. But clearly these people, this has to be dealt with very seriously, just like robbing a bank or stealing something, and you are stealing something, or a physical crime. I think we got to view these things as not a victimless situation, but really an attack on the whole system of government, the whole system of trust, and the whole system of business here in Croatia. So these things ought to be not tolerated, and fines, imprisonment, humiliation, I think, are critical aspects that go together.
This is also related to the state that we are in. All the world is in basically the global crisis that also came from the banking system and the problems they had. That's how the whole global crisis started. Where we are now today? I mean, are we getting out of the crisis? And how did American economy change after this big crisis that they're facing, that we are facing?
Yeah, there's no question. Of course, we have had the most serious recession since the 1930s. I think the good news is we've had public policy responses worldwide, even in Croatia, but certainly Western Europe and the United States and in Asia, that are finally getting us out of this very severe downturn that I think, as you correctly said, was driven by excesses. Excesses certainly in the financial markets, but excesses as spending sprees by we consumers. But I do think we probably have, maybe in the third quarter of 2009, hit the bottom, and in the fourth quarter and into 2010, we'll see pretty decent growth in most of the major economies of the world. I think maybe Croatia will lag, ironically, to some extent, because it didn't have the financial or the housing crisis as severely as Western Europe or the United States did. But as the world economy grows, I can see Croatia expanding maybe now in the latter half of 2010 and into 2011.
But also, at the same time of this economical crisis, America was changing the political change because of the election and coming of the new president, Barack Obama, and bringing the new policies, especially one of the your research interest is also energy policies. So how will American economy change because of this new way of promoting a green energy, renewable energy in American way of doing business, basically? Is this the way of New Deal, like in 30s, like changing the businesses? I mean, helping out the economy to get out of the crisis.
Yeah, I think we do. I mean, clearly in the 1990s and the early part of this century, under the end of the Clinton and through the 8 years of the Bush administration, there was a movement toward a much greater reliance on the private sector to solve problems, to deal with issues, and especially rapid growth of the financial sector. Clearly, the Obama administration is putting a much greater emphasis on the government sector, putting a lot of constraints, maybe not enough even, on the financial sector, and starting new emphases and new priorities. Healthcare, sustainability, green energy, climate change are certainly critical elements, all which involved a lot more government involvement than in previous administrations. And I think the role of government is now swinging away from the Bush administration over toward the Obama administration,